Jesus was a rock star.
Do how to win at life, you know? And so I just put that on the calendar. And so then as the day got closer, I thought, well, what do I want to talk about? So then I was reading some stuff and I was reading somebody else's sermon because, well, I'll just show you the slide. I stole that slide. I'm not that good to make that 4 truths to win at life. So then I'm preparing for the 4 truths to win at life. And then I kept on thinking about Pastor Cal. And so then I thought, I'm just going to use Cal for all of my illustrations today. And so now as I was working on it, well, then I had a real conflict. What am I going to call this? Because it didn't quite fit. So then I thought, okay, how to win at life. Another week it says how to look like Jesus. I thought that would also be a good title for this message, how to look like Jesus, because Cal certainly did. And just so you know who Pastor Cal was, in case you don't know, I think most of you maybe do, but Cal was a youth pastor his entire career. He passed away about 3 years ago, and he was my second youth pastor. When I was a junior in high school, Pastor Brad Lewis was the youth pastor. He is now he is recently retired. He sort of retired. He's not really retired, but he only does what he wants to do now. That's the way to retire. But then Cal became the youth pastor, and so he was my youth pastor for a year and a half, and then I had a couple years away, and then I interned under him for a year, and then we worked together for another 7 years. So I worked together with Cal full-time for eight years. And so got to know him real well. I know a couple of stories. One, I shared at the driving to church this morning that I could never tell you in church, just so you know. But I did it in driving to church because I thought that if you go and seek me out, you know what I'm about, you know, and I can, you know, to driving to church. But that's one of the things about Cal was Cal could get away with anything. He could get away with anything. I could do the same crowd breaker that he did, and this happened more than once. I would get a call from the senior pastor at 10 o'clock at night after youth group because of something I did in youth group. The time I swallowed a goldfish, I got that. The time that the worst one I ever did, this is about Cal, not about me. Anyway, so Cal could do all of these things, and he loved crowd breakers, as you might imagine. And the crazier, the better. And he could get away with anything. One was that he kind of got a little bit of trouble with this one, but not with the parent, with the actual kid. I don't remember how the crowd breaker was, but somehow, some way, the person was sitting and they had their blindfolded, and somehow had this person take off their sock and rub like dirt on their foot and then put like a fake wart on the toe. And he had this toe and his foot was out, and I don't remember how the gag went. What I do remember is somehow, some way, they blindfolded this sweet, nice little girl, and she was kissing this toe and foot, and then they took the blindfold off. That was a pretty good, that was a big time Cal. His favorite, he did this crowd breaker, I'm sure it was hundreds of times, and it was the egg blowing contest. So you have all these teenagers and you have them come up for the egg blowing contest, and you take a hose. You remember this one, Jolene? You take a hose, and it's about an inch wide hose, and you put an egg in the hose. And so one kid has one side of the hose, the other kid has the other side of the hose, and you say, ready, set, go, and they both blow. And whoever blows the hardest, they try to get the egg into the other kid's mouth, okay? But what eventually happens is it's a deadlock. You're blowing, and as soon as the kid goes and has to breathe, that whole egg just shoots right into the back of their throat. It really hits them hard because it's a lot of pressure right there. And so that's pretty good right away. But the best part of the crowd breaker, though, then Cal would take on the winner. Okay? And so then Cal would be there, and they would be blowing, and he would take his mouth off and go like that. And he'd shoot them in the face with the egg. He did that hundreds of times, I'm sure of it. Now, if you were to talk to Cal and you told him that you knew me, I know exactly what story he would tell you. He would tell you about the time that we had a human video happening that was where they kind of act out a song. And we had Jesus on the cross, because in those days, Jesus died on the cross in every human video. And so he is on the cross, and kids were going to write their names down. And then as we were planning it, this one kid says, you know what would be a good idea? Let's use flash paper. And so the kids will write their sin or addiction on the flash paper, and then we'll have them come and we'll drizzle them over a lantern, and they'll flash, and it'll be like their sins are being burned away and flashing away. And so decided that was a good idea. So I'm there, and I'm doing worship, and I'm over on the side. Now, at this time, I think I was interning at the time. This is during my year of internship, because I still had hair. Not just hair like on the top of my head, now that's going, but I had hair going down my back. I had quite the mane at that time. And I didn't know it was a mullet until years later, but it was a mullet, but it was a glory mullet. It was curly, it was all this stuff. So I'm there, and so they ran out of flash paper. And so when they ran out of flash paper, what they started doing is the kids were just writing on normal paper, and then they put it in a box. And so then Jesus, at the certain time in the song, he gets off the cross, and he picks up all of the kids' sins and addictions. And he walks over, and I don't know whose idea this was, but it was not a fire marshal. They took an oil lamp, like an old-time oil lantern, and they put it in a cardboard box, an oil lantern. And so then Jesus comes off the cross. He takes all the sins, and he begins dripping them over, and the flash paper is going off. Well, the problem is they had mixed the flash paper with normal paper. So some of them didn't flash. Some of it just started on fire and fell into the box. And I'm about 10 feet away, and I'm looking at this box, and I'm thinking, this is a problem. And then it's smoking a little bit. And I should have acted even quicker, but the flames are coming up over the top of the box. Do you remember what I told you what was in the box? An oil lantern, okay? So we have like a bomb on the stage, and it's literally the flames are coming up over the top. So finally, I get up, and I yell, get out of the way. And I reach down and I grab this cardboard box. And now the flames are, because it was flash paper and paper. The flames are, I don't know how big they were. To hear Cal tell the story, it was like 6 feet tall. But I grabbed the box, put it over my head, and yelled, get out of the way. And it was like the parting of the Red Sea. Kids on both sides scattered, right? And they opened the door in the back, and we had like a concrete stairs out there. And I threw that box out the back door. Oh, but after taking the oil lantern out, okay? So that's the first thing I did. I got it, and I reached into the fiery box, and I pulled out that oil lantern, and then I threw it. But if you met me, you would know that was the story Cal would tell you about me. Some of his other favorites were the one where you have an ice cream eating contest, and one kid doesn't know it, but they have Crisco. That's a real classic. If you were in a youth group in the 90s, you did Chubby Bunny. Do you know what Chubby Bunny is? Okay, you can't do it anymore. The lawyers won't let us because too many kids choke to death. And that's not even a lie. But we would do Chubby Bunny, and that's where you shoved as many marshmallows as you could in somebody's mouth. Our record was 34 of those big marshmallows. This girl had cheeks that just would not quit. And so now we're sitting in things with me and Cal. The ideas always got bigger and bigger and crazier and crazier. So we thought, we've done Chubby Bunny so many times, we want to do it again. What should we do? And we decided, I don't know whose idea it was, me or Cal, let's do Chubby Bunny Roadkill. And you know what Chubby Bunny Roadkill is? Well, what you do is before you shove the marshmallow in the teenager's mouth, you dunk it into ketchup. And so you dunk it in ketchup, and then you put it in the kid's mouth. And you would shove as many, which makes ketchup and everywhere and things. One time we had a youth convention. And in this youth convention, we both did something stupid, both Cal and I. One was him and one was me. I'll tell you mine first. We had flash pods. We used flash pods in our wedding. So I knew how to use them. And we had just done an Easter production. And so I knew how to do the flash pods. But one of the flash pods weren't working properly. And what we were going to do is we had this kid, and I forgot what the storyline was, but for some reason this kid was running in the youth convention. And then Marvin the Martian, which we had this guy that he had a big belly, skin tight, dressed like Marvin the Martian, and he had a helmet on and stuff. And so he's shooting this kid. And then when he's shooting the kid, there's the flash pods are supposed to go off. Well, I was setting up the flash pods, and something wasn't working right. And I would take and I would put the powder in there, and it was one thing of powder for all 3 flash pods. And one of them was going off every time I loaded it up. And so, but then long story short, 2 of the flash pods had 3 times the amount of gunpowder that they're supposed to have. And so the night comes, and this kid is running, and the first flash pod goes off, and we had these 2x4 things, these boxes that would go up. They had chunks of 2x4 in the audience. It was awesome. The biggest ball of fire you ever saw inside. Boom, boom. But Cal's was even better. He said, let's have a space shuttle fly through the sanctuary. And it seats a couple thousand people. So he had this guy build a space shuttle, and he builds a space shuttle. And our job was to run and pull it. So I was leading a team of people who were to pull the rope so the space shuttle would fly across the sanctuary. It's very cool. It had a fire extinguishers in the back, so shooting fire extinguisher powder out the back as we're running. And so it's time, the thing comes, we start to run. And I got like 10 guys, because it was made out of wood, and it was, like 12 feet long. I mean, it was a big, heavy thing. So we're pulling it, and all of a sudden, someone goes, stop, stop, stop. They're freaking out. And I'm like, what? And so we're just pulling, man. And what had happened was the space shuttle was going up, but then the space shuttle got a little ahead. So the rope that we were pulling on had gotten in slack, and somehow, some way, had gotten itself tangled around the leg of this one youth pastor's wife, lifted her up off the ground and over a seat, and then so that's when they were screaming at us to stop. That was Cal. That was all Cal. That wasn't me. Cal would do stuff. This was all Cal. This was not me. We did the spot, which got bigger and bigger and bigger. We had like 1,000 kids coming to this event, and one of the events is we would give the kids goggles and leather gloves and a baseball bat. And then we would have they had a salvage yard, and they would pull in a car, and the kids got to smash that car as long, for so much of time. So kids would be doing this. And we got to do it for as long until the cops came, which happened every single time we did it, because every hit of the baseball bat sounded like a gunshot. Bam, bam. And there was one guy calling the cops every time we did it. So Cal goes to the guy's house and asks him not to call the cops, and there's this whole big thing. And so anyway, and one more thing of memory of Cal, and I really feel sorry for you if you are going into youth ministry, because you will never experience this. Cal really liked this, and I asked my daughter if she knew what it was, and she didn't. And who here knows, if I say that I goosed you, you know what that means? Anybody not know what that means if I say that? You're not going to communicate with me either way, are you? Okay, so anyway, I think the reason why the kids now don't know what that is because you would get arrested if you did that now. Goosed was you would pinch somebody's butt. And so if you were on staff with Cal and you were doing announcements in front of 1,000 people, and he came up next to you, he would reach over and pinch you in the butt, and you had to keep a straight face so that you didn't respond to that. He did it so often, and of course then we all did it to each other, that Inger Lisa molested me before we were even dating. Just little sweet Inger Lisa came up and grabbed my butt. I'm pretty hard to resist, as you might imagine. Grabbed my butt in front of Pastor Cal, and he laughed so hard because he was the king of pinching you in the butt in inopportune times. If we have to let's have some fun. Cal was fun all day long. Secondly, Cal knew how to ignore the haters. Now so why would anybody hate on Cal? Well, everybody loved Cal, but Cal had so much charisma because everybody just loved him. He was a really unique person. He had one of those, he just connected immediately and stuff. And so he knew everybody. And people sometimes get kind of jealous. Now, I made sure not to have the volume too loud. And so I'm going to go like this and like this. Okay? What you're looking at right now is from the 1990s. This is the rock group Sacred Warrior. Any Christian metal band people? They were in his youth group. These guys, and the bass player, that dude right there, he's super tall. And Cal would tell stories about how they would go out and they would hand out tracts and free tickets to their concerts and stuff. And because Cal had an imp, and that was in Wheaton, Chicago. These are those guys now. The pictures are better, I guess. Now they're old, as you might imagine. We're all a little older than we once were. Cal had good friends in the music industry. As you came in today, this is Randy Matthews. And he had the What a Good Ladies song. He came over and over again. He was one of the original rockers way back in the 60s. He had stories about when he would go to a church and they would protest against his rock and roll music and stuff. But Cal knew him really, really well. Did you know that Scott Stapp from Creed heard Cal preach? Cal knew his youth pastor, and in his youth group, Scott Stapp was there one time, which if you read the Creed guy, Scott Stapp, he knew God as a young person and then backslid. It is in his autobiography. And he talks about a night at that youth group. And I like to believe it was the night that Cal was there because that fits my narrative a little bit better. I don't know that. But Scott Stapp talked about feeling like God had dumped a 5-gallon pail of mouthwash on him. And Cal knew that. Now, what story am I going to tell about this? Well, Cal was invited to Ozzy Osbourne's concert when he was at the Fargo Dome. And so Cal goes to this concert and he gets backstage. Somehow the person that was running the stage or something so Cal is backstage standing on the side watching Ozzy perform, which Ozzy had already, he already was not the best performer at that time. Apparently all of his lyrics were on the screen and he sang in a monotone. He wasn't really great live at that time. But so standing there, Cal is there and he looks over and he sees Sharon Osbourne. And because Cal would talk to anybody, and he could talk to anybody, he walks up to Sharon Osbourne and says, "So what do you think of this guy?" He knew who she was, but he's just messing with her, right? And he had a conversation. But sometimes people were jealous of Cal because he could talk to anybody, and everybody knew him. And sometimes we would look at him and wonder, well, because he would talk to people, but he might forget that he was talking to you, that kind of thing. His mind was all over the place. Having a conversation with Cal or a meeting with Cal, you're constantly, of the two of us, I was the organized one, just so you know, that's saying something. And I think the reason why sometimes people would kind of, one time I was in a group of people and Cal would fast 40 days. He did that every year. And we were in a group of people and they were other pastors were making fun of him for fasting. Another time, they would say and I think it's because he was so brilliant and so full of charisma. But what was unique about Cal is that oftentimes people that have that kind of charisma, they can just talk to anybody. They're comfortable in their own skin. Everybody just likes them. Most people that I know like that, and I do know a few people like that, they tend to be kind of arrogant. They tend to be kind of take advantage and manipulate, but that wasn't in Cal. Had one of the purest hearts that I ever knew. And when he did get those little digs from here and there, he's like he didn't even notice, because Cal had another principle that he believed in. It was don't react, respond. I heard him say that many times. And now this is a great story. And I can't tell you all the characters because I know Cal wouldn't want me to tell you all the characters. But if I told you we had a concert. And I don't remember what year it was, but you would know the name of the band and you would know the name of everybody there very well if you listened to any music at all that was Christian back in the day. Well, they were coming to town, and we were promoting a concert. Last concert I have ever done, by the way, because of this experience. And so as the days are coming up to the concert, we realized that, you know what, people are not buying tickets for this concert. This isn't good. And so, Cal contacts them and tells them that, and they come anyway, and apparently the mission didn't get put. And so then the day of the concert, there was a whole bunch of bands. Long story short, I shouldn't tell you that yet. Before the concert, we knew that it was going to be bad. They had not sold anywhere near enough tickets, which if you're a pastor and a concert promoter calls you, they always tell you how much money you're going to make with the concert. Oh yeah, we'll split the profits, right? They say. And so they always say that, but little hint, in case you're ever in ministry, concerts don't ever make any money, almost never. And so before the concert, the lead singer of the main band, who's also kind of the manager of the whole thing, he comes to Cal, and Cal tells him, we did not cover the expenses. The $16,000 in the hole. And so Cal and this guy are going toe to toe. And I'm there, and I hear it in there. I know that they're in there. And then Cal came up, and he talked to his secretary. We used to call them secretaries back then. The administrative assistant. And we talked to the administrative assistant, and she finds the facts that Cal had sent, telling them that we should cancel the concert because there's not enough tickets sold. And so what ended up happening is they split the losses. And so our church had to pay $8,000 and the organization had to pay $8,000. So $16,000 was lost that day. But Cal could be tough. He could be tough. Now, how did the church handle that? Well, there was another concert at the same weekend as that. Ray Boltz came to town, and this is hilarious. Well, depending upon who you are, I guess. That concert did make $8,000. And the pastor that was promoting that was excited about how he was going to spend that $8,000 on things, But then the senior pastor said, well, let's see here. One weekend, one concert lost $8,000. One made $8,000. We're square. Just put them together, and there we go. So that was how that is. He was tough. Cal could be tough. He was incredibly fun. But at the same time, he lived like heaven mattered. He lived like heaven mattered. I know because sometimes Cal knew that you needed a pastor more than you needed a friend. Now, if you look at different youth pastors, some will run their youth group and they're very stern. I've seen that kind of guy. I've also seen quite a few youth pastors that they are such a buddy with their kids that they're just one of the guys. Cal did that balance incredibly well. He could be tough. You need a pastor more than a friend. One night, we had an event at the church, and this kid was getting ornery and wild, and I don't remember what happened, but Cal taught me how to call the cops on kids. And he would actually even say that if you haven't called the police in your youth ministry for the last couple of years, you're probably not in youth ministry. Every couple of years, and I would do that later on too. I learned that, because I can't put my hands on them, but the cops can. And it's amazing after you call the cops how the kids behave better. All of a sudden they leave as soon as you call them the cops. You're 911, and they see it. Well, one night there's this guy. And he was being loud, and I don't remember what the problem was, but Cal was going toe-to-toe with him. And so Cal follows him out to the parking lot, had already called the cops. The cops are on the way, and the guy starts his car and revs his engine. Cal is at the window of the car. He reaches into the car, undoes it, and takes the kid's keys. And then the kid just loses his mind. He's just screaming and yelling. And the cops did tell him when they got there, you probably shouldn't have done that, Pastor. You should have just, And Cal said, yeah, but he was probably would have hit somebody, And he had this logic of why it would do it. But he taught me how to call the police. But I really got to learn it. You're snoring back there. You really got to... I learned this personally. I had been leading worship in youth group my junior year and my senior year. Second semester, my senior year, Cal comes to me and he fires me from being the worship leader. The music pastor, Pastor Bruce, had gotten an intern, and they wanted him to lead worship in youth group. And because they wanted to give him experience leading worship every week. And he was better than me, by the way. I forgot his name, but his brother was a very famous Christian musician and I forgot his name too, but Charles could tell you because he knows the family well. But I have forgotten their name. So he was a much better musician than me. So it's not like they weren't getting a better deal out of it. But then Cal says to me, but Scott, he doesn't have time to set up the equipment. So can you still set up the equipment? Because what I would do is I would come in at 5. I would set up all the microphones. I would set up all the stuff. And so he fired me from leading worship. And then he tells me still to do all the work. And then I'm in youth group. Oh, and by the way, this guy, he would come in a half hour before youth group. So we didn't even get to practice. So he would come in and just walk up and start playing. Yeah, I did everything else, And so then I'm leading, I'm playing my guitar, behind this guy. And then someone comes up to me later and he says, Scott, why are you even up there? We can't even hear your guitar. Why are you doing that? Now, just so you know, musicians, we have an ego. I don't know if you knew that. We like it when people like our music. We like it when people can actually hear us play. But Cal was smarter than me. Cal knew exactly what he was doing, that it was going to be hard for my heart. And I'm so glad he did. You know why? Because that night, I made a step spiritually. I said, well, Lord, if nobody can hear me, you can. And I just worshiped with all my heart. What an important thing to happen inside of young Scott. It was so good for me. See, Cal knew that he wasn't just my friend, he was my pastor. And he was able to bridge that gap. Now, about a month ago, I shared with you something that had happened to me where a rumor was spread about me that wasn't true. Remember, about a month ago, if you're here, I shared that story. And a little bit of it was true, but nowhere near what was being said about me. And I told you about a month ago that in the staff meeting of the church, they were discussing my sin, okay? And Pastor Brad, who I mentioned a little earlier, he said, you guys, Scott told me about that right away, and this is what really happened. And so he was able to say that I'm already aware of this, which went well for me. And a few weeks ago when I shared that story, I told you how good it was that I confessed my sin to my authority, because then he knew what really happened. Well, Cal was the youth pastor, and he was actually technically my pastor at the time. And so he gets together with me, and he says, Scott, and he begins asking questions. And he asked, did this happen? Did that happen? Did that happen? Did that happen? And so he just took me through the paces. It was a very uncomfortable conversation, as you might imagine. I appreciated about Cal that as fun as he was, as much charisma as he had, he knew when he was pastor, and he knew when it was time to be friend and have fun. But he lived like heaven mattered. Now, I hadn't worked with Cal for a few years. I was let go from First Assembly and was never given a reason. Another pastor was let go from there at the same time. There was a reason for him. And there's lots of reasons for me. They just didn't tell me it at the time. Now I could tell you why they fired me because I'm smarter now. But Cal said to me later, he said, Scott, that other guy was fired and you were fired, and we talked about you because you handled it well, which you can, because of the people who invested in me, I'm just so grateful that I happened to handle it well. And he said, we all thought we were next because it was kind of a wild time. We all thought that we were next. And so then the years began to go by, and I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago, something like that, Cal began to have some health problems. There's a big flood in the community one year, and he had a heart attack at the same time. And it was a whole big thing. And his health began to struggle. And then in the midst of his different health challenges, he was let go from his job. And that became kind of a neat moment for us. We were already getting together for coffee periodically and stuff, and he loses this same period of time. He continues to have health problems. He passed out in the parking lot of a hospital and hurt his shoulder or something, banged himself up in the hospital parking lot. During the same period of time, Cal was on, I don't remember where they were, but they're on a beach someplace, and his family they're all swimming. And his son-in-law was swimming way out, and there's people all over this beach. And Cal has a heart condition. He can't exercise hard. And he sees that his son-in-law is struggling in the water. He had gotten his legs tangled up in some weeds or something, and he begins going down. Of all the people in that huge stretch of beach, the guy with the heart condition that can't exert himself charges into the water. Now, his beautiful wife, Kelly, is on the shore yelling, "No, Cal, your heart, no." So she's yelling for him to stop. His son-in-law goes underneath the water, and Cal goes down under to get him, gets him back to shore again, and it saves his life. His son-in-law spends a little time in the hospital. It was a huge thing. So he's going through quite a lot of trials during this time. There was unfortunate things happening with his ministry in the Chicago outreach that he did. And during this whole time, you would think that would get a guy down, and it did. I'm not going to tell you that he was happy that all of these things happened. But there was one blessing. He would tell you it was a blessing, and that is that he lost his health insurance when he left the church, and he wasn't old enough to qualify for Medicare. And so that was the biggest challenge that he had was health care, especially with all of his health issues. And famously, he knew that Starbucks had health care. So Cal begins to work at Starbucks. And if you were to talk to Cal about during that time, he made Starbucks sound like the greatest job anybody could ever have. Now, as you might imagine, if you knew Cal, he wasn't the best at making the coffee, but everybody loved him, and so they put him on the window. So he was the drive-through guy at Starbucks. The whole place in there called him Pastor Cal. And he would talk about the Lord constantly, and he was so disarming, I mean, he had this natural charisma about him and unconditional love, and anybody that he met, if you got to talk to him during that time, you wanted to work at Starbucks after talking to Cal. And this is a guy who has been in the full-time ministry for probably 30-some years, maybe 40 years, and was suddenly had to find something different. And you would have understood if he would have said, "Oh, I've been in ministry all this time, and now I'm working at Starbucks." It wasn't how he looked at it. Why? Because Cal always kept heaven in mind. He wasn't tied to the things of this world. In Philippians, it says, "But I will rejoice even if I lose my life, pouring it out like a liquid offering to God, just like your faithful service is an offering to God. And I want all of you to share in that joy." Cal got that. Now, if you met him casually and didn't know him well, you wouldn't really peg him for somebody who fasted 40 days every year. He did eat some popcorn, but he fasted every year for 40 days. You wouldn't expect him to be someone, well, he was the kind of guy that could live off of 4 or 5 hours of sleep every night. Not all of us are geared that way. But he did well on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So he'd go back bed late at night. He was up early in the morning, and he prayed. He powerful prayer warrior. But his life was an offering, and I'll never be like Cal, but I do know what it is to enjoy what you're being called to do, even when it isn't ideal, and to just trust God with it. And so if you were to take somebody and want to see what Jesus looks like, Cal was like that. You could tell him some big sin, and he would have hope for you. He would lead you through that. So if you want to win at life, a good person to look at is Pastor Cal. And the way we worship, and just to sum up, what should I look at with Cal? Just smile. Enjoy it, have fun, love the people around you, and I would add, this is to carry inside of your heart the 10,000-year rule. The 10,000-year rule is spend your life today on things that are going to matter 10,000 years from now. And Cal got this, whether he called it the 10,000-year rule or not. Because when you are on the other side of eternity, and we're all going to be there at some point in time, when you are 10,000 years from now, all of us will be there. There's only going to be 2 things that matter to you on that day. It's what did you do with Jesus, and what did the people you love do with Jesus. And when you hold those 2 things in your heart and mind, you act differently. When you're tempted to just say things to make people feel good when they should feel bad. Remember I told you that Cal wasn't just a friend. He knew how to be a pastor and how to make things hard on you if that's what you needed. Those times of just enjoying people and enjoying life, only 2 things are going to matter 10,000 years from now. And Cal got that. So as we worship today, with a couple more songs, I want to encourage you to enjoy the Lord. I want to encourage you that when we go out for our meal today, laugh and tell stories. And if you want, you can look up the one on Facebook that I told on driving to church, and the one I couldn't share with you here in church. Because our God is fun. And I think Jesus was fun too. You know what story I think was the most fun? You read the fish and the loaves. I think Jesus was totally messing with them. I think he was snickering under his breath. Hey, why don't you guys feed him? You know, all we got is these few fish and a few loaves, Lord. You just go do it. I think Jesus had a sense of humor. I think that's when our God looks the best. Lord, I thank you for Pastor Cal. Lord, I thank you for our church. I thank you for the people that are here. Lord, I thank you for the ministry that is happening in us and around us. Lord, I thank you for the story that I heard this morning of someone being invited over for Thanksgiving. And it was such a blessing to both of them, Lord. God, love you. Thank you for your family, God. Thank you for the people that you put in our lives. And dear Jesus, come have your way with us, oh God. In Jesus' name.
Jesus was a rock star.